Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Historia Politica Publica. This will be the second episode about the book of Alexander Dumas, The Count of Monte Cristo. In the first part, I spoke about the background of the story, a bit about the beginning, the plot of the first pages in the war, because I don't want to do many spoilers during these episodes. I spoke about Villefort, Dantes, Mercedes, Caderousse, the other, and Fernando and the other character, which is Danglars, are the main characters in the world. So there is the father of Edmundo Dantes and some. And in this second, I wanted to explain about the revolution in France, how this affect the development of the story, the persecution of the Bonapartists, which I touched slightly in the other episode, and go further to Abed Faria, the main character who he met in prison. So, as I mentioned in the other episode, there is a conspiracy against people who supported Bonaparte, Napoleon Bonaparte, the French emperor, but the thing is, like, there was also a current which, in order to gain the favor of the new established king of France, Louis XVIII, there were people who were falsely accusing other people to become Bonapartists, and so on. This has happened in history many times, those during the Inquisition, accusing of heresy, others, the woman accused of witches, people accused of revolutionary, of insolence, and so on, the current of McCarthyism, accusing everybody of communism, and so on. This is a trend in history in order to spread terror among the population and at the same time win favors from the elites. So, Bonaparte became the emperor of France in 1804, and he ruled until 1815. At the beginning of this book, The Count of Monte Cristo, Napoleon is still in the island of Elba. He has been in prison. However, he escapes later. And it is interesting because when the Abbe Faria and Edmond Dantes meet in prison, they speak among themselves about it's interesting because obviously Abed Faria was in prison in 1811, so he thinks that Napoleon is still the emperor of France. However, Edmond Dantes told him that Napoleon is in prison in Elba. But the interesting thing is that when they met, none of these things have happened. At that time, Napoleon has done the comeback during the 100 Days War until he finally is defeated in Waterloo. But it's interesting how the war unfolds outside the prison, but Faria and Dantes are not aware of that. And therefore, this is an important idea of how nowadays we are very connected to our news. It's hardly that we miss any significant event in the world, or at least what the media believe to be significant and they put to us through the television, internet, newspapers, and so on. But for those people who are completely isolated from the outer world, in the dark dungeons of the island of Eve, they are not able to grasp what is happening outside, even though it's such a significant event like the Empire of Napoleon. So going before, just a bit sum up about the French Revolution. In 1789, the revolution started. The day which is celebrated is the 14th of July of 1789, which is the day that the fall of the Bastille, when Parisian crowd stormed the fortress. This was a consequence of the high prices in France, the inflation after the war in the United States, how the France was financing the United States in order to defeat the English. This was during the War of Independence, 1776. In America, they got independence. At the same time, France saw how their resources were diminishing through putting a lot of money in a war in another continent. Obviously, this has many reminiscences what is happening right now, how the USA wanting to inflict a deadly blow in Russia. They are arming Ukraine, and at the same time, the economy in the United States is going down and so on. So this is, you can establish a parallelism here. Obviously, every context is different, but the idea of how a different superpowers can be fighting among themselves, even there is not a direct conflagration. And obviously this was very clear during the Cold War, how Soviet Union and the United States, they fought in Afghanistan, not directly, but through other kind of militias, how the United States financed the Mujahideen, who later became Al-Qaeda, or in Korea, how the Soviet Union financed the North Army against the South Army, who was being financed by the United States. So we have in October 1789 the Women's March on Versailles, when the king and the queen are dragged back to Paris, and it is established the constitutional monarchy. I think this is the most important date of that year of 1789, even though the fall of the Bastille is more symbolic. I don't want to diminish the role of the symbols, which are fundamental in revolutionary periods and when there is great change in governments and in the societies. But the Women's March on Versailles, actually, it made that the king and the queen, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, were dragged back from Versailles, and they were put in prison in Paris in order to be close to the population, because after the fall of the Bastille on the 14th of July, the conditions of the poor people in Paris did not improve at all. Henceforth, it was the women who wanted that the promises that had been made will be accomplished. And after we have the years of the revolution until 1794, in one episode I will develop this further because there are many things to tell about. But the important thing here is that in 1799, Bonaparte seized power and became First Consul. Bonaparte arose as a Jacobin during the French Revolution. He used the boost of the masses to defeat injustice, and he won appeal among his comrades until he had a lot of power. He became part of the Directory, which, if I am not wrong, it was formed by just 5 persons. One of them was Napoleon. He seized power, became First Consul, and 5 years later, in 1804, he became the Emperor Napoleon I, and from then on he established a campaign to conquer whole Europe. He goes to Spain, he goes to Belgium, to Italy, and so on. He goes toward East, and finally he is defeated in Russia in 1814. And after, in Spain, he also loses a lot of his army. At the end, he's imprisoned in Elba, and then he escapes and finally is defeated in Waterloo. So, within this idea of Bonapartism involving the work of Alexander Dumas, which, by the way, his father fought for Napoleon. His father was of Haitian ascendancy. In fact, Haiti became independent during the French Revolution, when Robespierre and the other Jacobins guaranteed the independence to the country. To Haiti, they give freedom to the slaves, although after that they are crushed and they keep fighting back and so on. This is more complex, but the thing is that his father, 1793, he raised as in the rank to become a general in the army of the First French Republic, which has been proclaimed 1 year before. In that sense, this was a symptom of how the progressive ideas of the French Revolution took place, like how a Haitian could become a general in the army, and this is because the measures implemented by the revolution. So with the father having support Bonapartism, the son Alexander Dumas unfolded his idea through the years from 1815 until 1839. In that sense, as I mentioned earlier, when he's in prison, I am speaking now about Dantes, he will encounter a person who will change his life. This is the Abbé Faria, who was in prison in 1811. It was accused for having a role in the unification of Italy in 1871. Those years in which there were important figures such as Garibaldi or Mazzini, and he's considered revolutionary, and for that reason he's in prison. In that sense, as I explained earlier, you have here the importance of being aware of your surroundings, but because they are in prison, they cannot know what is happening around them, so they do not know what is going on in France and with Napoleon Bonaparte and the army and so on. The world seems to have stopped under the dark prison of the islands in which both of them, Dantes and Faria, are in prison. Finally, as I mentioned at the beginning, I won't tell more about the story because I think it is such a great book to read. It's so thrilling to know how Dantes is developing his ideas afterwards. And I really encourage all of you to read this book. Also, it's not very long. It's like less than 200 pages. You can read a couple of days. It's very, I think it's very intense because it covers a wide range of topics like despair, desolation, love, revenge, reward, justice. What is justice? And you can extrapolate this. Is something that I want to talk now, and also about some cultural references and parallelism with our world. So, reading Dantes, reading the story of Dantes and the Count of Monte Cristo, I could not avoid to think about the practice of lawfare which has been implemented in Latin America, especially since 2000. Curiously, consequently, I will say, with the rise of the so-called pink tide, the progressive left-wing governments in Latin America. In that sense, the lawfare which Lula suffered and Lula da Silva, the current president of Brazil, and who impeded him to participate in the elections of 2018, it was due to a conspiracy done by the judges in Brazil to avoid that he could present himself to the elections in 2018, in which the polls made him winner against Bolsonaro. It predicted a huge victory of Lula da Silva. So Dantes, same as Lula, he suffers a false trial and both of them are put in prison. And same as Lula da Silva, Dantes left the jail. Lula da Silva was in jail, I think, for 3 years, and he was released last year and a half, and could participate in the election against Bolsonaro and finally won the election. So both of them were in jail, Dantes and Lula da Silva, through a false trial. And even though both of them faced a last cry of authoritarianism, neo-fascism, and so on, eventually their enemies fail. I call authoritarianism in the way of a Dantes, like a kind of this current of restoration which is happening in Europe when he's released of jail, how the monarchies are being established again after the revolution. However, the ideas of the revolution that spread across France and in Europe could not be eliminated ever, and this changed the modern society until nowadays. But still, there are some reminiscences of those people who want to come back to the past, to the dark times, and also to impose some values who are not inherent to human nature, whatever human nature is, but was based on this idea of oppressing the masses. And precisely, Lula da Silva, when he was taking power, there was a coup d'etat, an attempt in Brazil, in which thousands of people went to the parliament and emulating what had happened in United States 2 years before, when a mass of people tried to overthrow the elected government, taking the capital. Here in Brazil, there was also this movement in order to overthrow Lula da Silva. Finally, 1,200 people had been detained in Brazil, and this cry of Bolsonarism had been defeated, at least for the moment. And in the same way, in the Count of Monte Cristo, those people who want to keep in a corrupt society like Danglars, Di Fernando, Villefort, and so on will be gradually face the consequences of their acts, not just for what they did to a Dantes, which at the end is one person, but also for what they have been creating in society. And Fernando, for example, is interesting because it's his story, how he raised among society through lies, mischiefs, and so on, not just in France, but also in Greece. So the story is very good to understand this different aspect of politics, historical context, the strategies carried by different people in order to climb the ladder of the social spheres, and so on. Apart from real life, and there are many more examples that I was thinking about when reading Count of Monte Cristo, same as the injustice that is being faced by Julian Assange, who is still in prison, like Dantes in the war, and it is not known if he will ever be released again. He's also a prison in an island which is called the United Kingdom for committing a crime like the Secret Act Service, the first time in history that the United States had used this law, which is implemented to accuse people for betray the UK government. And Assange, what he did is, like, as the chair of WikiLeaks, release the murder of a Afghanistan citizens and Iraqi under the hands of the US Army. So, going to the cultural references of the Count of Monte Cristo, in cinema there is one movie which, as a trilogy, I like. Well, now there are 5 movies, but I think the first 3 are great. Is Pirates of the Caribbean. And when I was reading the Count of Monte Cristo, I could not avoid thinking about the beginning of The Dead Man's Chest, the second movie of Pirates of the Caribbean. This is clearly a reference to Edmond Dantes and his escape from prison. Jack Sparrow, the main character of Pirates of the Caribbean and the captain of the Black Pearl, at the beginning is inside the prison. We don't know how he came there. We don't even know where is Jack Sparrow at the beginning of the movie. It is interesting because the first time that we see him in that movie is when he's out of jail. But the thing is, like, he used the same tactic to escape as Dantes. I mean, I hope that this is not a spoiler and I won't describe the strategy carried by Jack Sparrow and Dantes, but let's say that these parallelisms are quite evident. Also, Sparrow is inside a prison in an island, same as Dantes, and so on. And same as Dantes, when he left the prison, he goes out with an idea to find a treasure. Dantes, thanks to his engagement with Abed Faria, this intelligent prisoner who had been studying for many years within prison and so on, and gives him the guidelines to find a treasure outside, which this treasure precisely is in an island. And Jack Sparrow, when he left the prison, we see him gathering with his crew in the Black Pearl, and how he shows a piece of paper which accordingly will take him and the crew to a treasure. So here there are many analogies. Whereas Jack Sparrow have to go to Isla de Cruces in order to find a coffin with the dead man's chest, precisely as the name of the movie, which is this chest in which there is something which will help you to control the seas. It is the heart of Davy Jones. And in the book, Dantes has to go to the island of Monte Cristo. In that sense, both Sparrow and Dantes are people who have been marked. Dantes, for its desire to revenge and reward, he has been symbolically marked by the development of his life, by his past. He cannot pardon all those who have conspired against him to put him in jail, but at the same time, he must reward those who were nice with him in the past. And we have here moral people like his father and so on. Although he will be heartbroken when he finds that his father he has died when he was in prison. In that sense, it is important for him how he cannot escape his fate, because all the influences that he has been shaping his life will put him in the trail of those different people. On the one hand, those who he wants to punish, and on the other hand, those he wants to reward for their kindness towards him and his family. At the same time, Jack Sparrow is not just symbolically and figuratively marked by his past, but literally he has a black mark in his hand, which is it was done by Davy Jones, because I think 10 years before the second movie, or 15, Davy Jones promised Jack Sparrow to release the Black Pearl from the deeps of the ocean, in which it was I think it was a shipwreck, and the Black Pearl is under the sea. So Davy Jones, he offers him to rescue the Black Pearl under the condition that in 15 years Jack Sparrow will have to reunite 100 souls to give to Davy Jones. In that sense, I think he offers sacrifice himself, but after he offers to give 100 souls to Davy Jones and so on, after the negotiations. But the thing is, like, both have been marked, and in order to escape their fate, Jack Sparrow needs to go to the earth, to the ground, to the islands, and to take 100 innocent people to sacrifice themselves for Davy Jones in order to save himself. And for Dantes, in order to save himself, he needs to also go to the island, to the ground, to the earth, and start his revenge and reward. And only through this process he will be able to redeem himself. In that sense, whereas Dantes is persecuted by his past and his desire for reward and revenge, Jack Sparrow literally is persecuted by a huge kraken. And it's interesting because Sparrow seems to not have consciousness, because when somebody asks him, but how do you feel to... I think it's Davy Jones who asked him, how do you feel to put 100 people to die, innocent people, in order to save himself? Don't you feel bad? And he said, no. So this is a clear opposite view of Dante, who has really a consciousness about what is happening, whereas Jack Sparrow, at least externally, it doesn't seem to have one. And the parallelisms and also differences between Jack Sparrow and Edmond Dantes are clear, and the second movie of Pirates of the Caribbean is a clear reference to the Count of Monte Cristo. And finally, another cultural reference that I found is the fact of that V, the main character of V for Vendetta, his favorite movie is precisely the Count of Monte Cristo, and there is in the graphic novel and in the movie, there is a constant reference to the book. He's even watching the movie, and when he tells Eve, his friend, how he knows all the lines of the movie, he has watched the movie many times, it's his favorite movie. It's obviously that Alan Moore had extrapolated the ideals of the Count of Monte Cristo in V for Vendetta. And it's clear because in V for Vendetta, same as in Count of Monte Cristo, this is a story about the past, about love, about intelligence and knowledge all together. Because whereas for Edmond Dantes, he learned mostly about his engagement with Abed Faria when he's in prison, because Abed Faria has developed this kind of... It's crazy because he has written in different shirts. In order to put the shirts plain, he has used the oil of the lamps and so on, the fat of the food, a lot of different kind of styles to learn, to write his ideas and so on. And this helps Dantes to learn more about the world, and this obviously joined with his experience in the sea, when he was the second captain of the Pharaoh and so on. It helps him to develop himself. And for V for Vendetta is his extensive knowledge about the books. In his secret place, he has books which has been forbidden in the authoritarian neo-fascist war of V for Vendetta in the city of London, when it is curfew. V for Vendetta is basically studying a lot, reading different tests and so on. He has ideas which has been forbidden in the outer world. So same as Edmond Dantes, V for Vendetta is learning hiding under the dark depths of the society. They are invisible for the outer world. Dantes is inside a prison in the Isle of Eve, whereas V for Vendetta is inside his secret place in his house, but both of them are non-existent for the outer world. And V for Vendetta precisely will go, when he faces the outer world, it will be with a mask, and Dantes precisely, he covered himself with the bear, with a kind of clothes in order to disguise himself when he finally met the person who betrayed him in the past, and also those who love him, like Mercedes and so on. So this idea of disguising themselves when they are in the outer world to not be recognized is both in Count of Monte Cristo and in V for Vendetta. So, again, Moore emphasizes the importance of the ideas in V for Vendetta, of the symbols, and the need to cooperation to carry on new strategies. The role of the Abad, Fagia are symbolized by the books in V Secret Place. Edmond Dantes learns in prison, and when he's free, establishes many alliances to carry on his aims, such as V for Vendetta. Same as Dante, which, by the way, Edmond Dantes and Dante, the writer of the Divine Comedy, the main character of the story of Dante Alighieri, goes into deep hell in the Divine Comedy. So it is the story of going to the underground to come back again. Dante Alighieri, and his name taken by Alexander Dumas to put it in his main character, Edmond Dantes. And for Edmond Dantes, even though the past won't ever be forgotten, he will learn of it, remember it, and go towards the future. And this is one of the most beautiful lines that I have read in his book. Let me check literally what it says. He's told by a person which is Haidea, a very important character of the book. He's told, quote, "I need to love you much more of what I already love you in order to make you forget." And Dante's reply, "Forget? Never. But, my love, we are going towards the future." It's important because it explains that the past won't ever be forgotten. However, he will be able to learn for it, remember it, and go towards a new kind of life. But always remembering how the role of the past has shaped yourself, because it is inevitable that we remember the past because we are being formed by our previous experience. Nevertheless, this doesn't mean that new adventures will not arise in the dawn of our days, in the sunset before the night. And just to finish the episode and the series about the Count of Monte Cristo, Dante also said that, "Will it be possible to me to be happy again?" This is the question that Edmond Dantes asks himself. He sees redemption nearby, and he starts to see through the mist of envy that his enemies impose upon his gate. So to conclude, the Count of Monte Cristo, one of the main ideas, I think, is the fact that we cannot escape our past, even though we try to forget it, doing everything which is in our means, because we have been shaped by it. And yet, this is not bad. It means that we can learn from our past, and the future that we want to build with our loved ones, how do we want to do? It will be also safe for the conditions in society, in our environment, but our own aims. Obviously, Dantes is trying to pursue a policy of reward and revenge, but in order to do so, he needs the material conditions that society can offer him, which in the book is a vast amount of richness. In the past, he was kind, he wanted to do the good, but because he was not a powerful person within society, he was inevitably curtailed by other people who had some power in their means. Mostly the judge of Villefort, who at the end he had in his hand the power to carry on justice. And as we know, he didn't do that. So Edmond Dantes, The Count of Monte Cristo, Alexander Dumas, this is a great story published in 1844 and 1846. Between those years, those were years before the revolution of 1848. Was years in which Victor Hugo was also publishing in Paris. He had published Les Miserables. It was a huge epoch of huge turmoil in Europe, and there were intelligent people who were able to grasp what was going on there. So again, this is a novel, very essential, I think, to read, very interesting, and I will encourage all of you to read. And thanks for listening to this episode. I hope that you have enjoyed. Let me know if you think there are other aspects of the book that are worth to be emphasized, and let's see you in the next episode.